Welcome everyone, my name is Lawrence Villegas. We're here to hear about a nutritional technology from Switzerland. It's VizPur technology, and to talk about that, to teach us how this works, is Dr. Irina. She goes by Dr. Irina. She's from Russia. She's a medical doctor. She's a surgeon. She's also has a doctorate, a PhD, and she's also a doctor of natural medicine. She's an award-winning doctor from Russia, and she has studied this technology, and she's here to explain to us how this works, and we're so pleased to have her.
What I want to talk to you about today, it's actually just address your left brain, your logical mind, and to explain to you how this thing works and what is the breakthrough. So because when you understand it, then it syncs with you, and when you take the product, no matter if it tastes good or bad, but you will know it's good for you because it does these things to your body. So I want to explain you what it does to your body. But before I do that, before I go into the explanation of the particularities of mechanism of action of VizPur technology, let's go through a few facts. Well, I have a question for you. How many of you guys have supplements in your medicine cabinet? Just raise your hands. Okay, great. 90%. 90% of you. So you're in a good company, because half of Americans actually use vitamins and supplements, nutraceuticals in their daily life. And they spend a whopping $27 billion on that every year. It's $27 billion industry, which is a huge monster. And this market is also quite difficult to penetrate, as you can imagine. In order to win in that market, you need to have something really unique, really effective, some breakthrough. And that's what we are talking about today. It's a VizPur technology. It is a new breakthrough in nutrition. Americans are using more and more nutritional supplements. Like this percentage, 56% of women over 60 take, for example, and we are taking just one example of vitamin D, which is, as you know, is very vital for your health. It keeps your bones strong, it keeps your immune system great, it keeps your skin looking beautiful, it keeps your blood flowing. Vitamin D is one of those super nutrients which everyone needs, and which we can actually get by exposing ourselves to sunlight. But because we all use sunscreen, and sunscreen, as you know, prevents our body from developing vitamin D. We all deficient in vitamin D. So we need to supplement it, so we start taking it. 20 years ago, only 30% of women over 60 were taking vitamin D, now 56%, so almost doubled. So awareness is growing, people are taking more supplements, and that's just vitamin D. That can be applied to any other vitamin and supplement out there. So we are eating more. We are stocking our medicine cabinets with bottles and bottles and bottles. How many of you have more than one bottle of vitamin in your cabinet? Good. And some of us have stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks. And when you look at yourself in the morning, you have a handful of pills trying to swallow, and in the evening. So how is it different from drugs? Come on, guys. Why is that happening? Why are we taking more of vitamins now, and we are still deficient? The latest statistic shows that 40%, and that's a low figure, and can be as high as 77% too, according to other sources, are deficient in the same vitamin D. So we are taking it and we are still deficient. So how does that works? The situation is that a lot of really, really vital ingredients for our body, such as vitamin D, such as omega-3 essential fatty acids, such as super nutrient CoQ10, coenzyme Q10, and many others, are fat soluble. So we need to take a fat which has this ingredient diluted in it in order to absorb it. But our body is not designed to absorb fats from digestive system. It's designed to absorb water and everything water soluble, but not fat soluble. So when you're taking something which is fat soluble, only about 10 to 20% of the substance will be absorbed by your body. So if you need, for example, 2,000 units of vitamin D every day, which is kind of a standard figure, and for those of us who are deficient, we need about 3,000 to 4,000 units, you need to take about, 5 to 10 capsules of vitamin D. And that brings a lot of other problems with it, because it becomes costly, first of all. Second of all, your digestive system is not going to respond favorably to that. And there are other many really not so great consequences of taking a lot of anything. So problem with fat-soluble nutrients is that they have low bioavailability, only 10 to 20% bioavailability. So what can we do? The question actually is easy. Well, and the answer is easy. If we cannot absorb fat-soluble nutrients, we probably need to make them water-soluble, because we are 60% plus water, so everything that can be dissolved in water can be easily absorbed by our body and work as Mother Nature intended to. And that's where the technologies fail. Well, how you make something that can be dissolved only in water, water-soluble? So that's where VizPur technology comes in. This technology can be applied to not any particular ingredient or nutrient. It can be applied to any fat-soluble substance. It can make fat-soluble substance water-soluble. And because our body is so much water, now it will take those nutrients in and will increase immensely the bioavailability of them. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. It does. Now we need to know how it does it, right? Just saying that it makes that water soluble does not quite activate your left brain, I think. So let's see how that actually happens in your body. But for that, we need to kind of remind ourselves what our digestive tract is and how it works. Well, we all know that we swallow the food, it goes through our mouth, where digestion actually starts, then through esophagus, then through stomach, and goes in our small intestine and the large intestines, which actually have a very, very large surface. The surface of our intestines about 27,000 square feet. So it's a huge surface, and the way our body actually manages to create such a surface inside is because the insides of our intestines are wrinkled. So they have those, the valleys and mountains and hills, and all covered with the villi, and the actual cells of the intestinal tract are covered with a thin layer of water. So there is always a thin water layer on the surface of every single cell of the intestinal tract. And if substance is water soluble, it can easily penetrate and go into the cell. If it's not water soluble, if it's fat soluble, the fat obviously will be just bounced off the surface as you too digest fat. So what happens? When you swallow some fat, it goes into your stomach and it goes into your what we call duodenum, right, at the beginning of the intestinal tract. And there is the liver, and the liver creates what we call biosalts, bile. And that bile goes first in the gallbladder, where it accumulates, right? And then when we eat something, the gallbladder contracts and throws a large amount of bile into the intestinal tract. And that's how digestion continues. Now, the process that happens after that has a name, and it's very interesting because not many of us talk about it. The process is called the micellation. The body creates micelles. In order to better explain you what micelles are, I will give you an analogy, and it will be a little interesting one. I thought about it this morning. Imagine that your liver is actually I don't know the English word for it, but the place where ants live, like the big pile, how you call it?
Anthills.
Anthills, yeah. So imagine that your liver is anthills. And it produces a lots of little ants, right? Little ants, bile salts, that can actually run out. Now these ants are what I would call lipophiliacs. Imagine that. I will translate. Lipo means fat, right? Liposuction. Philiacs, phil, means loving from Latin. So lipophiliacs would mean what? Loving fat, right? So these ants are crazy for fat. So they just love it. So when the fat goes into digestive system, all these ants who normally hang around in the gallbladder ran as crazy to the intestinal tract, and they will take these big pieces of fat in pieces. The pieces become smaller, just these yellow little dots. But then what these ants do, they kind of jump on every piece of fat and say, guys, it's a party! Let's do it! So they put their little jaws in these pieces of fat and then encage it. So imagine this is like piece of fat, right? And these are little ants. So the front part of the ant with the jaws that is attached to the piece of fat is fat-loving or water-phobic, afraid of water, loves fat, afraid of water. So it's hydrophobic, but it's lipophilic, right? It's lipophilic. So they attach this little jaws in a piece of fat, but the other end of the ant, their butt, is water-loving. So it's hydrophilic. So we have a hydrophobic part attached to the piece of fat, hydrophilic part on the outside. And those ants start carrying these things through the intestinal wall, which we already know because the outside part is hydrophilic, it will go through intestinal wall right into the cell. Does it make any sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So these ants, but there's an interesting quality here, because these ants are collective animals. So they work together as any, ant community. They have collective intelligence. So,
They just came in and you were talking about ants. Can you tell them what the ants are in the analogy? Because I'm looking at them going, what are we
in my
sitting
analogy,
into?
Ants on ants.
Chocolate covered
what does this have to do with ants?
I know.
It's an analogy. We are talking how biosalts help micellation. So we are talking micellation process, and in my analogy, bile salts are ants. So that's how they deal with the pieces of fat. And we call these ants lipophiliacs. which totally I created the word. It doesn't exist. But, so what happens next? So imagine many of these pieces of fat, right, surrounded by these little ants. So the ants actually create the cage. So these bile salts create a cage around each piece of fat and carry it through the intestinal wall into the cell. So there are many of these units, these little cages around. But the process will only work when there are many of those cages all together. So it's almost like when these ants go, oh guys, you know what, food came, there was a party, there was fat, okay, let's go and utilize it. So they all go, they all jump on these little pieces of fat and carry them through. Concentration of these micelles, and as you can imagine, this unit we call the micelle, right? So when we have a high concentration of micelles, everything works fine. So everyone is doing what they're supposed to do. The problem begins when there are only a few micelles there. When we don't have enough ants, and they're party animals, right? So there is no party. I mean, it's pretty boring. Okay, well, there is a piece of fat with these things around. Like, I'm alone. In this situation, micelles disintegrate. And if they disintegrate, no digestion happens. So fat will not be utilized. There is certain, what we call a critical micelle concentration, CMC, critical micelle concentration, below which absorption of fats doesn't happen. So we always need a high concentration of these units, these micelles, in order for the process to work. That only can happen if the release of bile happens at once, like massive release of bile, and the process works. Imagine if gallbladder is not there. Then what happens? Then bile, of course, it is being produced, or ends being produced by the liver, but it will be just dripping drop by drop into the intestinal tract. So yes, micelles will be formed, but only a few of them. They cannot survive when there's just few of them. So absorption of vital fat-soluble nutrients in nature, if the gallbladder is not there, doesn't quite happen. And for those of you who are looking at removing gallbladders, or those who have people with a gallbladder removed, you may think, well, it's not a big deal, right? It's just a sac. What is there for? Does it accumulate stones? Not quite. Mother Nature does not create things for nothing, so that's what your gallbladder is there for. So it can release the bile massively and facilitate the digestion or absorption process. We have an expression typically, we are what we eat, right? But that's not quite correct, because what is important is not what we put in our mouth, it's what we actually absorb. So the more correct expression would be, we are what we assimilate. And the more correct expression would be, we are what we micellate. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So how we go around that situation? And of course, not just people with no gallbladders have that problem. Lots of us have that. Sometimes the liver is not functioning properly. Sometimes it's just our diet is not correct. So the micellation process is not working as it should. This is actually just for you to, I forgot about that slide, but that's showing you that below certain critical micelle concentration, micelles disintegrate. And that's, if you look at the water concentration goes down, micelles disintegrate. Oops. Okay. So what we would need to do, we would actually need to make the micelles more stable, correct? Mm-hmm. Because if they're more stable, they can survive. That's your Viz technology, guys. That's the whole sense of VizPur technology. It creates stable micelles, where the fat-soluble substance is surrounded by ants and exists in the body long enough to be absorbed in the upper part of the digestive tract, or middle part, or bottom part. So it will be eventually digested, even though there are just few micelles there. Well, if you want, it was a song, "All by Myself." Remember that? Mm-hmm. Well, you can say, "You all by myself." Well, that's it. So imagine that lonely micelle that travels along the digestive tract singing all by myself. All by myself. Guys, that's your Viz. So, welcome, Viz. Now, this is called nutrition we can feel, because it's a tagline, because you really can feel it pretty fast. And amazing body's benefits will be actually shown to you really, really fast.